Welcome to the Keeping the Nostalgia Alive show. I am your host, Billy Powell. You can catch this. You're probably watching this on YouTube, where you can go to YouTube, just type in the Keeping the Nostalgia Alive show. Please subscribe for all of our interviews. We have over 200 interviews on there from Rick Mount, Kent Benson, Gene Katie, you name it, they're on there. You can also listen to our audio podcast at anchor.fm/KTNA. All of our podcasts are on there also. Today, though, we have a guest, is author Ed Snyder, and he has a book which is called Their Times in Indiana with Billy Shepherd. There we go. There we go. And it's available at theirtimesinIndiana.com. And we are with the author, one of the authors today, Ed Snyder. Ed, thanks for taking some time to talk about the book and what it took to make the book. And we appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on your show, Billy.
Ed, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Well, I am really no different than just about everyone else who grew up in Indiana in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that time frame. Just a big basketball fan, and I am retired now. I live in Florida during the winter, and I felt like I finally had the time in my life to do something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, which is to put together a book that honors the great sport of Indiana high school basketball.
Are you originally from Indiana?
I am. I grew up in Lafayette and went to Lafayette Jeff High School, and then I went on to Purdue and graduated from Purdue, and my wife and I have lived virtually all of our lives in Indiana, mostly since we've been together in Indianapolis.
So when did this idea come about? What kind of light bulb went off on the top of your head that I want to put this together? And how did you start? Where do you start to take on something like this? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think there's 44 chapters in the book from players and coaches.
Yeah, the idea actually came to me when I was a boy. When I was about 15 years old, my grandfather, who was my inspiration for loving sports, and who, interestingly enough, went to Purdue and roomed with John Wooden for a year. He gave me a book about baseball. It was called The Glory of Their Times. It was written by a guy named Lawrence Ritter, and he wrote a book. Lawrence wrote this book about baseball, and he spanned the time frame of the turn of the century 1900 to about the First World War, the barnstorming days. Nobody had really written a book about that period of time in baseball when he wrote his, and he decided that to get the stories right, to get the stories out there, he tracked down all these old ball players and sat with them and got their stories and wrote this book in first person. And The Glory of Their Times was such an incredible book. I absolutely loved it. And I thought to myself then, I don't know that I could ever, write my own book or author a, certainly not a fiction book or anything like that. But I thought, maybe someday I could do a book similar to that. And so I'd been thinking about it all my life. Now, the way I was able to actually do it, which is to track down all these Indiana ball players and talk to them and write this book, was because I've had a 20-year friendship with Billy Shepherd. And that's why his name is on the title of the book. Billy was my confidant through the process, and he was also my connection to all the guys. Billy knows more about Indiana high school basketball, and he knows more of the characters involved in Indiana high school basketball than just about anybody you'll ever know. And so when I ran the idea past Billy and said I would need his help to find these guys, he was all in, and so we worked on that together.
Did you find it interesting? Did you find it kind of exciting to talk to some of these people that are in the book, just because we grew up with them?
Sure. I mean, it's always interesting to talk to somebody who does something that you really admire, and these folks were all tremendous players, and I really didn't know any of them other than Billy when I started the book. So, and there were even a handful of them, Billy, that I didn't even know who they were when I started writing the book. So that was really interesting to learn about those folks, and then actually get to talk to them and hear their stories.
Who was the most difficult person to get a hold of?
That's in the book.
Yes.
Um, that well, that's a good question. I didn't really have a whole lot of difficulty. When I got towards the end, there were a few guys that I wanted to track down that Billy, I don't know whether Billy or hadn't talked to in quite some time. Don Cornett down in Texas. Roger Kaiser might be the answer to your question. Roger lives just outside of Georgia, and John Mingeld. I know those three guys. I found myself, and those three gentlemen were quite shocked and surprised that I had tracked them down and wanted to talk to them about being in a book about Indiana high school basketball, because it had been so long since anyone had talked to them about their participation.
You probably had to love Roger Kaiser. What a fantastic human being.
He's unbelievable. He's tremendous. His wife Beverly is just a wonderful lady, and you're right. I love those two, and I've developed a friendship with them, and I continue to talk. I continue to talk with them at least once every couple months.
We can get everybody can get the book at theirtimesinIndiana.com. Does and some of this money that you're making from it, where's it going to?
Well, all of it will go to a charity of some sort. Most of it will go to I got a new kitten and he's walking on my keyboard. Sorry about that.
Oh no, that's going to be a viral moment. That's okay. What's your kitten's name, by the way?
His name is Boots, and he's walking around here. He's into everything. So all of the proceeds are going to go to charitable causes. Most of them are going to go to the YMCA's of Indiana. We've developed a relationship with the Y, and they have after school programs and summer camps and things of the like that my wife and I were really excited to be able to contribute to. So that's why the only place you can get the book, Billy, is at our website, Their Times in Indiana. We looked into putting the book on Amazon and maybe trying to sell it through some bookstores, but the amount of money that you would make doing that is so minuscule that I think for every book we sell on the website, at $30, over half, certainly $16-17, will actually be able to be contributed to charity. So we're trying to encourage everyone that we can to go to the website and check out the book, and then if they're interested in buying it, then more than half of the money that they spend on the book will go to charity.
Now, also too, on theirtimesinIndiana.com, can they get an autographed copy?
That would be kind of difficult. What I would ask someone to do if they were interested in that is there's a place on the website where you can find an email address. I'm not sure exactly what it is right off the top of my head, but if they send me an email and request one, I can certainly make that happen, and I would do anybody that would want to do that.
How long has the book been out?
We had a release that came out I want to say in late October, 2023. So only a few, several months ago, that had some editing issues that had to be addressed. So there were a few books that came out then, but then we got all that cleaned up, and the actual book that I would like to call a final book came out in mid-December. So it's not even been a little over a month and a half, and we've sold nearly 1,000 copies so far. So
Very
everyone
nice.
that has found the book has enjoyed it and has told their friends, and that's really how the word of the book is going to spread.
I was going down the list last night. My wife and I were going down the list, and I've had quite a few of these gentlemen on my program. But it's interesting that there a lot of the stories are a little bit of a different. Like there's a lot of things about Coach Dave Shellhouse that I didn't know that aren't in his book, which is called the Shellhouse Story. So it was quite interesting information to find out about him. Did you was there one particular interview or a couple interviews that you did that you really enjoyed and didn't think the interview was going to stop, or maybe you even needed two chapters?
Billy, I enjoyed every one that I did, and that's what made doing this project, writing the book, and then the book itself is such a great endeavor for me. I was concerned, when you have a goal of talking between 40 and 50 guys, you're concerned about the possibility that there might be one or two that wouldn't really be engaged in what you're doing. And then you'd have a difficult time, writing a nice chapter about them. But every single one of the guys I spoke to was fully engaged in telling me great stories. And so every single chapter in the book, I'm proud of every one of them. It was a terrific success as far as what I had hoped for. The conversations that I had, oh, so many of the guys, Billy, it just could have went on forever. I know probably the longest time that I talked to a single player might have been Dave Colescott. He was unbelievable. Um, of course, because we've already lost him. I will always cherish the time I spent with George McGinnis in his home and with Eric Montross on his call. And I would tell you this story about Eric. I did not know Eric at all. I don't know if you've had Eric on your program at all, but just an incredibly impressive young man. And I had my interview with Eric, and we talked for an hour and a half, and it was just beautiful. It was just a wonderful conversation, and I was thrilled with it. And I knew I could write a good chapter for Eric. And the way I wrote these chapters is I would record them. I have all these recordings of my conversations, the one conversation that I had with each of these guys to write the book. And I got done that night, and I went back to listen back to it, and I couldn't find recordings. So this is the only time this happened in the 44 guys I talked to. And I just panicked. I was like, I can't believe I had two different recording devices in this conversation I had with Eric. I had lost it. It didn't record. I asked my wife, she's like my technical expert. I'm like, where is this thing? She's like, I don't know, Ed, you don't have it. And I was just crushed. And I thought, what am I going to do? I knew I could write the chapter, but I wanted his words. I wanted to try to incorporate his voice into the stories. And so the next morning I got up and I called Eric. I said, man, you're not going to believe this, but, and I said, I don't even know how to explain this to you. I'm so embarrassed. But I said, I don't have the recording. And I could write your chapter, but I really want to be able to hear your words when I'm writing it. And he just said, Ed, just forget about it. Let's just do it again. He said, I had so much fun with this. I'm happy to do it again. Just don't even think about it again. Let's just, I'm available in a couple days and we'll just do it again. And that's exactly what we did. And I will always remember that, and be grateful for that. And that was just a pretty good example, and story to just represent what it was like with all 44 of these guys.
It's very interesting. You talk about Eric Montross and having that information, and he's passed. The same way with some of the shows that I do. I did one with Gene Tormolen, nicknamed Bumper, who's from played high school basketball in Southern Indiana, and then went on and played at University of Tennessee. And it's nice to have that recorded voice for family and friends and stuff like that. And what you're doing, it's especially though for those that have passed, have is really really important.
Yeah, it's you know, we're all getting up there. And when you get to our age, you start to realize that, life is a gift and we've lived most of it. We just have a little time left and we want to make the most of it. And so that's part of the beauty of this book, is that it gives these guys at least one more opportunity to share with other folks that, you know, that love basketball and love Indiana basketball, what their story was like. And so that was really what the goal of the book was to focus in on the time period in their lives where they were just growing up in Indiana, learning the game of basketball and playing high school basketball. And that's what Billy and I chose to keep the book focused on, was just that period of their lives. All these guys went on and played in college. A lot of them played in the pros. But the thing that they all had in common was their time in Indiana and playing high school ball in Indiana. And because most of the people that will read the book, not everyone, there's other people that are finding this book and enjoying it. But the majority of the people that will read this book also shared that experience of growing up in Indiana and playing basketball, mostly outside in our days, and then going to the high school gym on Friday and Saturday nights and watching their high school team play. And so from that perspective, we all shared that experience just the same as those guys had it. And that's the bond we all have together.
What was your time like with David Mag?
David's an incredible character. I, I like to tell people, Dave was a good player, but he probably wasn't, and he'd tell you this too, he probably wasn't one of the 25 best players in the book, but he's certainly the number one character. He's a hilarious guy. And I wasn't even sure I was going to try to find David. And I think it was Roger Harden that I was talking to. And he said, "Have you called Magley?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you got to call that guy because he's unbelievable. He's hilarious, and he'll tell you stories you won't believe." And so uh, that was certainly the case.
You told us a small story about Eric Montross. Tell us about your interview process with Big Mac George McGinnis, which was awesome.
So George, like I said, very kind man. I actually took, the opportunity to go invited to George's house and to sit with him and talk basketball. I wanted to share that experience with my best friend. There's a guy by the name of Steve Grettencourt. So the two of us went together to see George at his house. And we sat with him for an hour and a half and talked hoops. And we were like little kids. I mean, it was just unbelievable to get to sit with George. And, the thing that I thought was really neat about George is what I was hoping that he would talk, with a lot of these guys, whether it was Alford and just how, dedicated he was to working on his game, or the Van Arsdale's twins and the relationship they had with each other. I wanted George to talk about what it was like in high school to be so physically dominating against almost all of the other kids that he played against. You know, what is it like to be that big, that strong, that good, and to just dominate your opponent like you must have done in high school? And George just wouldn't go there. I kept trying to bait him into talking about that, and he just wouldn't go there. He was simply too humble of a guy to ever want to talk about, he might have been so, dominating or so much better than everyone else. He didn't look at it like that. He was one of the players, and he knew he was good. He knew played on a good team, but he wouldn't. He was too humbling to really talk about something like that. So, but he shared a lot. He shared a lot about his team and his two coaches, Jerry Oliver and Bill Green, and he definitely made it clear that the greatest days of his life playing basketball were when he was in high school.
That's awesome. Awesome stuff. And you also have Steve and Sam is in the book also, Alfred. Of course, I was on the bench at Broad Bowl in 1983 at Hinkle Fieldhouse when Steve dropped 57 points on Broad Bowl High School. So, how was the conversations with both the Alfreds?
Oh, they were great. Steve, he's a busy guy. He's still coaching and everything, so his calendar was very busy. I certainly remember trying to schedule one with him, which was a little difficult. He kept telling me, I only got so much time, Ed. So, and I kept saying, well, Steve, I'm gonna, in order for me to do what I'm wanting to do, I'm gonna have to spend some time with you. And so he finally said, I'll give you 45 minutes. And I thought to myself, okay, well, we'll do 45 minutes. And if we don't get it all, then I'll have to tell him we'll have to try to do another one. So we got on the phone, we got talking, and I pretty much let all the guys just talk about what they wanted to talk about. And he got to talk, and he got rolling with all these stories and what his life was like and all the people that he wanted to thank and credit for his development as a player. And we got to the 45-minute mark, and I said, I want to be I want to be conscious of the fact that you said you'd have to leave in 45 minutes, Um, he said, no, Ed, I'm fine. Let's keep going here. And I think it was probably like at the hour and a half mark, he was still going. And I was thinking, I've got way too much to write a chapter about now. I think we're good. But that was kind of like, it was like that with most of the guys, where you get them going and they're talking about something that, that was the love of their life at that time in their life. And they can just go on forever. And then Coach Alford, Sam Alford, I was just thrilled to have him be one of the endorsers of the book. And of course, he knew a little bit about it because he knew Steve had done this interview with me and probably had seen Steve's chapter. And I'll just always remember Sam being the one that said, it's about time somebody did a book like this about that period of time in Indiana high school basketball. And that made me feel really good about what we had done.
Has the book been? I know you've sold about 1,000 copies, but are you looking to maybe do a sequel?
No, I don't think so. That's an interesting question. The one regret that you have when you do a book like this, and certainly in Indiana, when you think about high school basketball from the early 50s to the early 90s, there are just countless guys that you could have done. And I sit here today and I think about all the guys that I didn't get to, guys like Ted Kitchell and Brian and Steve Walker. There's so many guys that I would have liked to have talked to, but I had to stop somewhere. I remember when I think I'd done like 25, and Billy, I was talking to Billy almost every day through the time period that we were doing this book, and he said to me, we got enough for a good book now. And I said, no. I said, I'm about halfway, Billy. I said, I'm only going to do this one time, so I want to get as many players as I could. And when I got to around 45 and I realized the book was going to be 650 pages, I just thought to myself, I have to stop somewhere. And so that's what I did. But certainly, you could do another book. I've thought about how it'd be good to do a book and go from, like, say, the 70s to like 2010. And then you could get a lot of the other, a lot of the guys, Eric Gordon and the guys that played at Purdue, Hummel, or you could get Gordon Hayward. There'd be a lot of great guys that you could talk to, but I don't know that I do that. I tell you, one of the fun things that has come out of it is a guy by the name of Pat Williams, who was one of the founders and the general manager of the Orlando Magic. He found out about the book himself, and I sent him a copy, and he called me on the phone and said, "Ed, this is just an incredible book." I didn't realize that Pat Williams, who was the general manager of the Magic when Evans was there, he knows all these guys in this book. He knew George from his days as general manager of the Sixers, and he's just as sharp as ever. And he said, "You need to do a book like this for the NBA." And I said, "Well, that's quite a compliment, and it's something to think about." But I don't know. I really, this was kind of like a bucket list thing for me, was to try to do a book like this, but I really never had any intention to do it more than once.
There are Times in Indiana by Ed Snyder with Billy Shepard, stories of the golden era of Indiana high school basketball told by players and coaches who helped make it the greatest high school sport ever. Ed Snyder, thank you so much for being on the program. People can go to theirtimesinIndiana.com to get the book, if I'm correct. There's also an email address in there with Their Times in Indiana if you want to request, like we talked about, an autographed copy. Ed, thank you so much for your time. This is fantastic. This is like Christmas every day because you get to pick. I did not start the book from the beginning. I went in and found the players that I wanted to read first, which is kind of it's very cool that way. So Their Times in Indiana by Ed Snyder with Billy Shepard. Go to the website, get the book today. I highly recommend it. It's a must-have. It's great on the coffee table. It's great in your bookshelf. It's great on your nightstand before you go to bed to read a story and keep Indiana basketball memories alive.
Billy, thanks so much for the support you've given on the book and for all the nice things you've said about it. And again, thanks for having me on your show.